Elderly truck driver enters the dealership saying he is the owner. Everyone laughed at him until the clock struck 3:47 p.m. when the automatic doors of the Titan Logistics Corporation, a modern carrier with a mirrored glass facade and trucks gleaming in the yard, opened with a light puff of warm wind coming from the road. Outside, the noise of the highway echoed in the distance, but inside the company, the environment was sterile, cold, and impeccably clean. Employees barely noticed when an elderly black man in oil and dust-stained clothes, worn boots, and a faded cap walked in with slow but steady steps. He was carrying a gray canvas bag, which looked heavy and antique, the kind of thing no one would see in such modern environments. His face was partially covered by the brim of his cap, but his skin marked by time and sun revealed decades on the road. His unshaven beard, slightly hunched posture, and simple walk contrasted sharply with his surroundings, filled with employees in light blue dress shirts, digital screens, and trained welcome smiles. The clatter of her dirty boots against the shiny porcelain tile floor caused discreet looks. A receptionist gave a cross look. One of the younger drivers in the background laughed softly. "Look, Grandpa got lost." Unfazed, the old man walked to the center of the reception. The bag still on his shoulders, he looked slowly around as if recognizing the place, not with surprise but with nostalgia. And then he said in a firm voice, but low enough for everyone to stop typing, "That carrier was mine." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before being broken by a muffled laugh. The receptionist forced a smile. "I'm sorry, sir. Do you need help?" Another employee mockingly blurted out, "Maybe he thinks it's a museum. These old stories." That's when the security guard, a middle-aged white man with a radio strapped to his waist and a badge reading C. Donovan, approached with long strides. "Sir, this is no place for that kind of prank. Let's accompany you to the exit, okay?" The truck driver, motionless, did something that silenced everyone. He took the bag from his shoulder calmly, lowered it to the ground with a heavy thud that echoed through the lobby. After that, he just replied, looking into the eyes of the security guard, "I didn't come to play. I came to show what they took from me." The laughter ceased. The air became dense. For the first time, someone noticed what was in the old man's eyes. It was not madness. It was pain. It's true. The silence caused by the old truck driver's statement was soon broken by the sound of the radio sizzling on the security guard's belt. C. Donovan, his belly slightly protruding, pressing against his private safety vest, stepped forward with exaggerated authority. With his hand close to the holster of the pepper spray, he approached the old man with a tone of someone who is used to dealing with inconvenient people. "Look, sir, no one wants to get into trouble. I'm going to politely ask you to accompany me to the exit, okay? This is no place for that kind of scene." The company's executive director, Mrs. Clarice Madison, appeared upstairs, watching the scene through the glass railing of the meeting room. She wore an impeccable white blazer and high heels. His cold eyes descended on the man, as if it were just a nuisance to be solved quickly. Down there, the old truck driver did not back down. He stared at Donovan for a moment. The room was suspended, an invisible tension. It was then that he slid the canvas bag off his shoulder and dropped it with a dry, heavy sound on the polished marble floor. Thump. The beat was so dense that even the echo seemed to contain years of suffering compressed into a single gesture. A sound that did not combine with garbage nor with misery, but with weight. Weight of something real, important, former. "Are you armed?" Donovan asked, now slightly more cautious. "No, what I carry weighs more than a gun. It weighs like the truth that no one wanted to hear." The eyes of some employees began to widen. The receptionist stepped away from the table. Discreetly, an intern whispered, "I wonder what's in that bag." Clarice went down the stairs with quick steps, already picking up her cell phone as if to call for backup. She approached with her elegant and impatient posture. "If this is an invasion attempt, we will take legal action. This is a serious corporation. We do not tolerate threats." The truck driver turned slowly to her, his eyes slightly teary but firm as steel. What I bring here is the evidence that this company was built on a lie that erased my name. But I'm alive, and what's in that bag, it's going to change everything. Clarice hesitated. For the first time, the authority in his voice seemed to shudder. The security guard stopped advancing. The employees were now completely silent, paralyzed between shock and curiosity. The old truck driver stood still, without shouting, without begging, only waiting for the world to finally look at him. The room seemed frozen in time. All eyes were fixed on that battered canvas bag, now lying as a symbol between ages, the one of those who laughed and the one I was about to hear. The old truck driver bent down slowly, his knees snapping under the weight of the years, but his hands, though scarred by time, moved with almost ritualistic precision. He pulled the side zipper of the bag and began to pull out, one by one, the silent evidence of a forgotten legacy. The first object was an old metal plate with rusty edges and the name Blake & Coburn Frets engraved in high relief. The logo, despite the time, was recognizable as the embryo of Titan Logistics' current symbol. A middle-aged mechanic who was watching the scene from the back of the glass-enclosed workshop approached with wide eyes. My father. There was one of these in the old shed. He said that it was from a certain Blake who founded all this, but I thought it was just a legend. The second item removed was a worn leather diary with the initials JMB marked on the cover. The old man opened it to a yellowed page and held it out to the director, Clarice, who hesitated but took the notebook in hand. Saturday, April 13th, 1972. First contract signed with the truck factory. Clarice was 2 years old. I feel like we're building something bigger than ourselves. The room fell into an almost spiritual silence. The truck driver continued. That was my diary. I wrote down each trip, every trade. I started this with my own hands. It was before everything was lost. The old man then pulled out original contracts with the city hall, signed expansion projects, black and white photos of him next to the first trucks, and even a copy of the company's founding title. In his name, Jefferson Marcus Blake. The signature was the same as the diary, the same as the documents he placed one by one on the reception desk as a rescue ritual. The junior accountant, who had previously laughed with his colleagues, approached discreetly. He took one of the papers and read it silently. The color on his face disappeared. These stamps, these signatures are legitimate. He's telling the truth. Clarice tried to maintain her posture, but her fingers trembled as she turned the pages of the diary. The date was ticking. The names matched. The narrative also. For the first time, the world inside that carrier stopped not by doubt, but for recognition. The old man looked around. For years I heard I was crazy, that I had invented everything, that I was just an old man on the road. But these walls here, he touched the counter, the marble, and the papers in front of him. These walls were built with my sweat, and now you know. Tension had already replaced laughter. The air was now charged with something denser than shame. Revelation. The old truck driver, with his diary open on a page marked by an old red ribbon, looked up slowly and said firmly, "My name is Jefferson Marcus Blake, and this carrier was founded by me with my own hands." The name echoed through the reception like muffled thunder. Director Clarice Madison widened her eyes. That was impossible. Her name, the name Madison, was on every plaque, on every letterhead, on every institutional communique. She shook her head. No. The founder was my grandfather, Charles Madison. He registered Titan Logistics in 1974. This is the history of the company. Jefferson gave a faint, sad smile. Charles was a partner of my old friend, Frank Madison, and Frank was the one who betrayed me. He changed the papers, manipulated the board, and with the help of 2 lawyers, erased me from the records. They said I was mentally ill, that I was unstable. I was removed without the right to anything, nor to the name. Everyone was silent. The older mechanic, now visibly moved, added, "My father used to tell me that there was a black man who suddenly disappeared, who founded everything." But no one believed it. Jefferson looked at everyone around him. The eyes did not carry hatred. They carried memory, pain, and dignity. They rewrote history without me, as if I had never existed. But I kept everything. Every receipt, every photo, each route, each contract signed. I kept it for more than 40 years. Because one day, I knew someone would have to hear the truth. Clarice was pale. His voice came out trembling. If this is true, it changes everything. Jefferson nodded slowly. I didn't come to take anything from anyone. I just came to say, this company was born from the dream of a poor black man who believed that trucks could open paths where there was no road. And that's all I want back. Recognition. It's my name. The employees were now completely paralyzed, some already with teary eyes, others with their heads down, processing every word. At that moment, Jefferson M. Blake ceased to be an old man on the road. He has become a symbol of something greater, the truth that resists, even when they try to erase it. Director Clarice Madison, visibly shaken, still tried to maintain her firm stance in the face of the revelation. She looked at the old papers with nervous contempt, as if touching them would admit something that could never be reversed. These documents may have been fabricated. We have many means today of simulating signatures. None of this proves anything concrete. His voice trembled. She tried to regain control, as if watching a castle collapse and trying to put the bricks together with her bare hands. At that moment, a junior accountant in a simple suit and an observant eye approached. Mateo, a 28-year-old, had been hired for a little over a year, but he had always been passionate about old files and corporate finance. Shy and methodical, he carefully picked up the diary and one of the documents. His curiosity overcame his caution. Mateo read it silently. Then he took his badge and went through the side roulette of the reception towards the digital file room. Tension remained at the reception. Everyone watched the old man standing next to the empty bag, which now looked like a sacred reliquary. 5 minutes later, Mateo returned. His steps were hurried. His face was pale. I compared the documents with the original records that we keep in the system. The papers hit. Everyone turned to him. Clarice, incredulous, crossed her arms. What do you mean they knock? Mateo engoliu seco. The signatures are identical to those of the Foundation's registration. The stamps are the same used by the Municipal Registry Office at the time. And there's one more thing. He held up a yellowed envelope he had brought from the archives room. This document was never included in the digital files. It is the original 1971 partnership agreement between Jefferson M. Blake and Frank Madison. It is on carbon paper, signed by the two, with witnesses. Clarice tried to take the envelope, but Mateo subtly backed off, holding firmly. That document was never annulled. It was never replaced. It predates any other Titan Logistics contract. And Jefferson is the main name. A shock ran through the room. The silence was no longer one of distrust. It was, for sure, the officials, who had previously ignored or laughed at the old man's presence, now looked upon him as one who recognizes a king without a throne. Jefferson took a deep breath. For a second, his gaze filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to remind you that the truth doesn't die. She waits. And today, it reached me. After the revelation of the authentic documents, the atmosphere at Titan Logistics headquarters had completely changed. The sound of keyboards was no longer heard, nor radio communicators. The only sound was the faint creaking of Jefferson Blake's antique boots echoing in modern hallways. He walked past the front desk, walking slowly, as if every meter he traveled was a page being turned out of a forgotten book. Officials instinctively moved away, no longer out of contempt, but out of respect. Jefferson reached out and touched the side wall, where today there were digital panels and photos of the founders, all with the surname Madison. This was where we hit the schedules in hand. A stamp and a clipboard. It was simple, but it was true. He continued on, passing a glass panel where drivers were handing out cargo documents. That counter, I built it with wood from the first shed. I cut it with my brother. I was 29 years old. He then arrived at the covered garage where the newer trucks with white paint, chrome wheels, and electronic stickers, were parked, ready for major routes. Jefferson walked to the back of the garage, where, abandoned in the corner, was an old truck covered by a dusty tarp. He pulled the tarp with both hands. The faded blue booth with nearly blacked-out lettering that read Blake & Co. glowed in the late afternoon light through the tall windows. The older mechanic, who watched everything quietly, couldn't stand it. "I swear to God. My father drove this truck. This one. It's the first of them." Jefferson ran his hand over the hood, dirty with dust, but still warm with history. He leaned his forehead against the bodywork as if he were meeting an old friend. "This engine has already met the whole of America. It broke in the desert, froze in the north, but it never let me down, just like my memory." Some employees were crying discreetly, others recorded in silence with their cell phones, as if they knew that that moment was history, alive and pulsating. Principal Clarice, now in absolute silence, watched everything from the glass room helplessly. For the first time in her life, she wondered if her family's legacy had been built on irreparable injustice. Jefferson, still standing in front of the truck, looked up at the sky through the garage windows. None of this was returned to me. I was the one who came back to get it, with dignity. Still standing in front of the dust-covered truck, Jefferson felt something in the air change. It wasn't just the tension anymore. It was consciousness, reverence, silence that weighs more than 1,000 words. He turned slowly and began to walk back toward the front desk, where the papers were still. On the counter, the diary, the contracts, the tests. No one interrupted him anymore. But that's when something unexpected happened. A young driver, no more than 22 years old, took out of his pocket the key to the truck he would use that shift, walked to Jefferson, and, without saying a word, placed it on the counter. Then he backed down. Soon after, a visibly emotional HR employee took off her badge, which she had proudly carried for years, and also placed it next to the key. Silence. And then one by one, the employees began to approach, and the scene that formed seemed like a collective ritual of symbolic reparation. A mechanic deposited an old helmet on the counter, which he found in the warehouse with the logo of the former company, Blake & Co. A secretary brought an old uniform that she had kept as a relic since her father's time, now understood to belong to the Jefferson era. An intern, trembling, placed next to it a photo of the team from 1974 that was forgotten in a frame in the hallway. Now they saw it. The man in the center of the photo was Jefferson. None of them said anything. It was not necessary. It was as if each gesture said, "We believe, and we are with you." Security guard C. Donovan, who at the beginning of the story was the first to want to expel him, approached. He took the cap off his head, put it on his chest, and said in a choked voice, "I'm sorry, Mr. Blake. We didn't know." Jefferson watched, everything without words, his eyes teary but firm. He took a deep breath, placed his hand on the objects, and murmured, "I didn't come for revenge, but to see this here, it has already given me what I needed." That pile of objects became a makeshift altar of truth. More than a protest, it was a gesture of reparation. More than institutional justice, it was human justice. The environment was suspended in time. In front of that counter, now transformed into an altar of recognition, Jefferson M. Blake remained silent. His eyes passed slowly over each face present, not with anger or pride, but with something deeper, peace. He then held out a manila envelope to the company's lawyer, who had already been discreetly called. The envelope contained all the original documentation, authentic records, and a letter signed with the phrase, "I don't want to destroy what I've built. I just want to be remembered as the one who started it all." The lawyer, a young, ethical man visibly impacted, nodded respectfully. Jefferson then collected his now nearly empty bag, put the faded cap back on his head, and walked slowly toward the door. No one tried to stop him. No one needed it. Before leaving, he turned around last time. He looked at Clarice Madison, who remained silent in the background, her eyes teary and her posture disconcerted. He just said, "It's not the story that hurts me. It is the silence that hides it. And then, left. Outside, the sky already displayed golden tones of late afternoon. Jefferson rode on the back of his old truck, the same one he had rescued at the back of the garage. He turned the key with his hands marked by the road and time, and left. No applause, no glory, but with dignity. Titan Logistics called a press. Fearance. On the company's official website, a new tab appeared in the main menu. Our history, the true founder, Jefferson M. Blake. At the reception, the portrait of Charles Madison was moved to the side, and in the center there was now a new image, Jefferson Blake, 1972, next to the first truck in the fleet. The text below read, "For decades we forgot the name that gave rise to everything. Today, we restore what should never have been erased." Jefferson drives on the highway at dusk. The truck's radio, old and squeaky, tunes into a program aimed at veteran drivers. The presenter announces, "And in today's painting, we celebrate the story of a man who paved more than roads. Paved dignity. Mr. Jefferson M. Blake, this excerpt is yours." Jefferson smiles, eyes moist. Turn on the headlights and continue your journey. On the rear bumper, a new adhesive strip glows in the evening light. There's no road too long when you drive with truth. For a long time, we were taught to judge by appearances. But the truth does not walk in a suit. She wears dust, carries calluses, and arrives slowly, like a lonely truck driver that no one expects. This story is not just about one company. It's about all the times someone has been erased, discredited, silenced. Because the greatest legacy anyone can leave, it's not money, it's a name. A name that resists time, injustice, and the shame of those who tried to hide it. If this story gave you goosebumps, comment now. Respect those who came before. Share it with someone who has never given up on being recognized. And if you believe that truth has no age, no color, like, subscribe, and spread this message. Let's make Jefferson Blake's name remembered as he deserves.